All right, I got another one for you guys. Embracer Group announces its intention to transform into 3 standalone publicly listed entities at NASDAQ Stockholm. So this comes directly from Embracer Group, and it mentions the transformation of Embracer into these 3 standalone entities. The first of which is the Asmodee Group, then the second is Coffee Stain and Friends, and the third is Middle-earth Enterprises and Friends. So long story short, just to kind of summarize here, Asmodee Group is the tabletop games publisher and distributor with an extensive studio network and IP catalog. So that's all the tabletop stuff. Coffee Stain and Friends is going to be focused more on the indie slash A slash double A sector of gaming. So they're going to be free to play games, PC, console, mobile, etc. for more of the smaller budget indie slash double A sector. And then the Middle Earth and Enterprises and Friends is the AAA game development studio wing. So that's all the big budget, the tentpole kind of stuff. So that's where they hold all their IPs like Tomb Raider, Lord of the Rings, so on and so forth. So that's kind of the big 800-pound gorilla that seems to be doing so absolutely horribly in the sales these days. And then, they split off the tabletop and the Coffee Stain and Friends. The thing that I wonder is how this is going to all work with, like, so for example, Tomb Raider, they licensed out that tabletop RPG to be created for Tomb Raider. So is that part of the Asmodee Group, or is that part of Middle Earth Enterprises and Friends? Now they do mention that these groups are going to be kind of farming work out through their IPs to each other. And so there is going to be some back and forth, but they're independent, publicly traded entities. So there is that avenue, and that might be where the whole thing with the Tomb Raider tabletop goes, or goes to die. So that's kind of where I see that kind of forming. But overall, I don't know. The question to me is why they're doing this now and what this all means. It could mean one of two things. I guess the simple explanation would be, take their big IP holder, which is Middle Earth Enterprises and Friends, and sequester that away, and then kind of sell off things of Asmodee Group and the Coffee Stain and Friends, and kind of peel those off of Embracer Group's core, just to kind of keep things going. And maybe those they start selling, I don't know, stock in those, or sell them off, or what have you, and then keep their core IP sequestered away so that they can farm that out and license that out and make money. That could be one approach. The other thing could very well be that, and I don't know if they're really seeing the writing on the wall in this way, but they could be sequestering away the AAA studios, which are doing so freaking horribly lately, to kind of twist in the wind and die. And then kind of focus their efforts on the tabletop and the indie, which the tabletop, I mean, they're not doing that well on tabletop, or the tabletop stuff either. But maybe they're sequestering away those AA indie developers so that they can kind of focus on that and kind of nurture that, because, the writing on the wall really is pointing to smaller budget games. So that very well may be a strategy here. I don't think that's the case, though, because these executive types don't really see the forest for the trees in that way. So I think it's probably the first one more than the second one. But we'll have to see where this all goes. It's going to be interesting because, they're all going to be effectively owned by Wingafor still. So he's like the main shareholder in all three of these effectively. So he still has control over all three entities. So it's kind of like three mini Embracer groups running out there in the world, but it does give them the freedom to kind of do things in a way that's most conducive to those sectors of the gaming industry, and kind of tailor the tabletop and tailor the indie to what they need, without having that AAA studio vibe kind of crushing everything else in their methodologies. So that could be too, is to kind of basically customize these businesses for the industries that they're targeting. But it's going to be interesting to see where this all goes, because this is not a good sign, I don't think. I think that this is kind of them seeing just how poorly their games have been selling, and pulling out all the stops to try and improve that down the road. But it is interesting to see the division, like you can see here. Where is that? Yeah, so Like the Asmodee Group, that's the tabletop. Net sales of 14.8 billion, and adjusted EBIT of SEK 1.9 billion. Coffee Stain and Friends was SEK 10.9 billion, adjusted EBIT of SEK 2.8 billion on a pro forma basis, and then Middle Earth Enterprises, which is like the big one, which is 14.1 billion, adjusted SEK 2.0 billion. So effectively, their Coffee Stain and Friends seems to be the stablest bet, with maybe total net sales a little lower than the other two, but surprisingly enough, their tabletop is actually doing better than their AAA, which I'm sure was not the case a few years ago. So that might be part of why they split it the way they did. But effectively, this is saying they're roughly equal. So 1.9, 2.8, 2.0 versus 14.8, 10.9, and 14.1. It's effectively splitting it into three equal parts, or as close as they can get in those sectors. But if you look at like some of the studios that Embracer Group owns, I mean THQ Nordic, which is effectively their big monster, and then PlayOn, which is like Deep Silver's their big one there, and then like there's Coffee Stain, which is the smaller this smaller group here. It's effectively all Coffee Stain, aside from Box Dragon, Easy Trigger Games, and then Ghost Ship Games and Lava Potion. But then they've got a bunch of smaller studios. Like there's a lot of smaller studios. There's these other studios like Aspire. I don't know where Aspire's going. And then Zen Studios, Tuxedo Labs, Tripwire. These are kind of more indie, especially like Tripwire. Or not Tripwire. I'm sorry, Tuxedo Games, which they did Teardown. So that's more AA indie territory. And then you got obviously Crystal Dynamics. So that's going to go to the big one, Eidos Montreal, same thing. That's going to be going to the AAA division. I don't know where Quantic Lab would go. And then obviously Limited Run Games, probably more on the indie AA. So there's some interesting stuff here. Dark Horse Comics, that's probably going towards the tabletop side, simply because comics and tabletop are probably closer than anything else. But then there's this is the Asmodee Group. So that's your gaming, primarily, like Exploding Kittens. There's a big one. Lookout Games, Plat Hat Games. But yeah, it's an interesting grouping, and I guess that makes sense to split all this up a little bit, just to kind of make things easier to manage, and see which one does best. I think there's going to be a fair amount of friendly or maybe not so friendly competition between these three groups going forward. But yeah, it's interesting, and it's not a good sign. It's basically saying, cut off the rot so that the rest of the tree can live, kind of thing. And I think the rot is actually the AAA side, which will be interesting to see, because I think they might think otherwise. They might think that these two are the rot, but I think it's going to be AAA, the AAA section, that's going to kind of do poorly, because they should be doing more than 14.1 billion, and they're not, obviously. So yeah, that's interesting to see. Anyway, it's gonna be fun. So no more Embracer Group. It's gonna be Asmodee, Coffee Stain, and Middle Earth Enterprises, effectively. So yeah, we'll see what they do. Personally, I think, like I said, I think those AAA studios are in for a rude awakening, because they're not going to have that almost 2/3 of their net sales to live off of, to produce all these big budget games. But maybe they won't be producing big budget games. I mean, there's a lot of layoffs, there's a lot of changes, there's a lot of closures in Embracer Group that happened even before this split. So yeah, it's pretty wild. It's going to be a fun show. So if you're an indie developer right now, I would say, this is your sign. Get right in those games. Now, I mean, I should take my own advice, right? But I'm working on that project, and I'm not doing indie games right now, but I will be sooner rather than later, I hope. And I'm taking this as a sign as well that maybe in the coming years, we'll see a resurgence of indie, and that's kind of what that side project is all about. Is getting indie games into the hands of people that want to play them. So that's what I got for you guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. C'est la vie, Embracer Group, and good luck to the three that are replacing it, it's going to be a bloodbath, I think. So let me know what you guys think in the comments, and I will talk to you guys later.